These are the 50 highest-grossing films of all time. They are all American. Hollywood rules the medium. North America controls roughly 1/3 of the global movie and entertainment market. British, German, Italian, or French cinema are not that relevant internationally, not even in their own domestic markets. Before the pandemic, US films held a market share of almost 70% in Europe. But that hasn't always been the case. Once upon a time, Germany was the world capital of film, and Europe had the biggest film industry on the planet. European film companies were technological pioneers and on the forefront of artistic innovations. They held market shares in the US of up to 50%. Then, the industry went from economic dominance to insignificance in the span of just a few years. What happened? How did Europe lose its Hollywood? The answer lies somewhere between fascinating economics, geography, lobbying, politics, and an assassination. Understanding the complex history of film means learning a lot about technology and statistics. If you, like us, love these kind of topics, Brilliant is just for you. Brilliant is a hands-on platform for actively learning new skills in fields like data science or statistics. There are thousands of lessons to choose from, with new ones added every month, so there's always something to explore. Drawing conclusions from big sets of data can be quite challenging. The Brilliant course Data Analysis Fundamentals shows you how to analyze real data with just a few bite-sized lessons. No matter where you're starting from, Brilliant matches your skill level and interests. By taking a quick quiz upon signing up, you'll be directed to the content that's just right for you. To try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/fern or click on the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. In 1897, photographer Edward Maybridge was hired to figure something out. Do horses have all 4 hooves in the air while running? He set up multiple cameras at a racetrack in Stanford, California. And in the end, he created this. The first film ever. But the rise of film did not happen in the US. It happened on the other side of the Atlantic. 2 brothers shaped what would later become film as we know it today. The Lumieres opened the world's first commercial movie theater in 1895 in Paris. One of the first movies they showed was this 50-second recording of a train arriving at a station. According to an urban legend, people were so afraid of the train rushing towards them that they panicked and fled to the back of the theater. From here on, the international rise of cinema could not be stopped. Around 1900, film became a global phenomenon. Cinema flourished in Denmark, in the UK, and Germany, but it is 2 countries that dominated the film industry at the time: France and Italy. French film pioneered in special effects. The stage magician Georges Méliès was the first who truly started experimenting with the possibilities of film. Italy became famous for its historical epics. The extensive use of extras and the immensely lavish sets established new production standards. European cinema was in great shape. It quickly gained around 50% market share in the US. The European film industry drove technical innovations like projection, color processes, and sound films. They pushed new forms of content like the weekly newsreel, the cartoon, the serial, and the feature film. Feature films are what you would call today's movies. 90 minutes plus, big stories, big promo, big stars. Before that, going to the cinema was watching a bunch of 15-minute stuff randomly mixed together. Think ancient YouTube. Back across the Atlantic, American filmmakers find their paradise. If you want to shoot a movie, you need light. The easiest way to get some is the sun. If you want to shoot many movies all year round, you need a place where the sun shines a lot. Enter a small Los Angeles suburb called Hollywood. California has a vast amount of different landscapes, relatively short distances between them, and perfect weather conditions. But there was another reason why the American film industry flocked to California. Thomas Edison. Edison held over 1,000 patents, many among them related to making movies. And he was not only a genius inventor, but also a ruthless businessman. Using his numerous patents, he formed the Motion Pictures Patent Company. The MPPC established a near monopoly on all aspects of filmmaking, and it was notorious for enforcing their patents, sometimes with the help of hired thugs. Before Hollywood, the American film industry was mostly centered around New Jersey on the East Coast. Many independent filmmakers chose to flee from the restrictions imposed by MPPC to the West. Californian judges were said to be less accepting of Edison's monopolistic practices. By 1915, over 60% of all American motion picture companies were located in Hollywood. This concentration will later prove to be an enormous advantage. Meanwhile, feature films turned out to be the industry's future. Longer, better films meant higher ticket prices, more people going to the cinema, and much higher profits. A race began. And for a while, the film industries on both continents were toe-to-toe, making more and more feature films every year. Then, something happened. It's the 28th of June 1914. A motorcade crosses through Sarajevo. It takes a wrong turn. As the cars attempt to reverse, a man steps up to the footboard of one of them, holding a gun. He shoots and kills the two passengers inside. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie, Duchess of Hohenburg. Shit escalates, World War I happens.
The First World War had a huge effect because the film production was then nationalized in all countries which took part in this war.
This is Dr. Markus Stiglegger, a film professor who helped us understand the subject. Thousands of people marched to the front lines. The next 4 years left Europe in ruins. But that's not the full answer. Far from it. The European film industry was alive and well throughout the war. People needed entertainment in dire times. Film became a tool of war. They were government jobs. The industry even grew a bit over the war years in some countries. Nonetheless, after 1918, Hollywood had completely taken over. How? The following section is largely based on a fantastic paper by Gerben Bakker, link in the description. While war was raging in Europe, the film industry in the US completely transformed. Almost all film became feature film, and feature films started to dominate theatrical entertainment at large. Regional markets became a national one, national ones became a global one. Within the span of a few years, it became insanely expensive to make movies, and therefore very risky, since you couldn't be sure anybody would watch them. But in turn, the money you could make with a successful movie was unlike anything the entertainment world had ever seen. Film production started to be all about really big bets. Smart entrepreneurs realized the potential of film. Anything with the word motion picture in it received enormous investments. Fox spent $92,000 on film production in 1914. The studio ramped that number up to $4 million annually by 1917, a casual 40x jump with the help of wealthy New York investors. Paramount was the result of the merger of several regional distributors and a big feature film production company. With their united power, they started rolling out massive national advertising campaigns promoting their stars and features. As a result, the company doubled its annual revenue within 2 years. Paramount pioneered a new thinking. Pay directors, authors, and writers whatever is necessary to get the best material possible. The concentration of film production in a single place benefited the industry greatly, as talent could easily move around, be scouted, be hired. The US film industry became the internet of the 1910s. All this money pumped into the industry of the future, so much hype, all these startups. Almost none of them survived. But those that did are some of the world's biggest companies today. Same here. By the end of the 1910s, almost everybody had gone bankrupt or been absorbed, except the so-called Big Five, plus these 3 smaller ones. It's no coincidence that you recognize almost all of them even today. These production companies played the game like no one else. They aggressively acquired theater chains and other distribution facilities in the US. They vertically integrated, so their share of the rapidly growing cake would be ever more enormous. By 1930, the Big Five plus Small Three controlled roughly 95% of US film production and distribution. Back to Europe. Even though the film industry here was still alive, it didn't participate in the insane race that happened in the US. It was behind. So far behind. In 1919, 90% of all films screened in Europe, Africa, and Asia were American. In South America, it was close to 100%. Market size mattered more than ever. You needed to show your films to a lot of people to make your money back. But the European market fell apart because of war-related animosities and regulations. As a result, in the 1920s, much of the European film industry collapsed. There was one exception: Germany. The only place Hollywood hadn't conquered yet because no American movies entered the country during the war.
Between the First and the Second World War, there was the Weimar Republic. And the Weimar Republic was still haunted by economic crisis. But the need for entertainment, and especially for cinema as a factor of entertainment, was huge. And in retrospect, you can say that the Weimar Republic era was the most fertile for German film history ever.
Studio Babelsberg was built next to Berlin in 1912. The oldest large-scale film studio in the world. Additionally, German film production was unified under one big studio, UFA. During the 20s, many talented filmmakers from Germany emerged, like Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau and Fritz Lang. Their movies were successful all across the world. Metropolis, for example, is still one of the most influential science fiction movies of all time. It was the golden age of German cinema. In theory, German movies could have flooded the US market since they were incredibly cheap because of national inflation. But it was shortly after the war, so the mood in the US towards German movies was hostile at times. Also, they were quite different from Hollywood cinema and not a great fit for the American audience. Variety noted at the time, "It is a curious fact about many German pictures. They deal with freak stories and have no romance, being entirely of men." Hollywood found its classic style. German movies were often expressionist. After the war, Germany had quotas to only allow a certain amount of American movies in their market. Over time, these quotas relaxed and Hollywood seized the opportunity. The studios bought up independent theater chains and flooded the German market with their films. UFA got into serious financial trouble and got bailed out by Paramount and MGM in exchange for distributing loads and loads of their movies. This meant that less German movies were shown, which meant less revenue, which meant decline. Hollywood effectively crippled its only serious rival. Then came this guy and sealed the deal. Over the following 12 years, every film produced under the Nazi regime needed Goebbels' personal approval for release. The industry officially prohibited Jews, leading to a significant exodus of German film artists to Hollywood. In consequence, Los Angeles was called the New Weimar, and the once thriving German cinema lost its talent. The Second World War destroyed film production all over the continent.
The effects of war on London, for example, or later on Germany, on the bombing of Berlin, they destroyed a lot of those production facilities. So by the end of the war, film production and studios had to be rebuilt in Europe.
European cinema wasn't dead, though. After the war had ended, Hollywood lobbied for film to be viewed as an economic product, not a cultural one. The studios wanted to ensure there would not be national quotas or limits, which would be incredibly damaging for them. Despite an all-powerful Hollywood, many European countries developed a flourishing film industry in the coming decades. Cinecittà in Italy had great years and is currently having a comeback. UK cinema found enormous success in some franchises and is a key player in global film production today. French cinema is heavily subsidized and regularly produces international hits, ramping up to be a major international locations hub. Germany manages to land international hits once in a while, especially when dealing with its own history. Nonetheless,
it was never possible to focus forces in the way that the American film productions were able to do that in Hollywood.
But why not build a union of film production, as the continent did for the economies at large?
Each country has a very specific needs, very specific ideas, and it's really hard to unify European cinema as the North American cinema could be unified by language and by certain themes and a certain mythology.
Though there are attempts. The European Film Agency Directors Association is trying to bring Europe's film industry closer together. By 2030, they envision European film to be globally competitive and culturally diverse. And despite Brexit, the UK is deepening its partnerships with other European film industries. Hollywood's role and approach to filmmaking has shifted over the years.
Without international co-productions, Hollywood wouldn't flourish today. So American film production is strongly dependent on co-producing internationally and even moving their facilities towards European and Eastern European countries to be able to produce on such a large scale. So American cinema is still very dominant, but like as a kind of organizing focus for a kind of global cinema which connects American productions with international companies.
Asian markets are now by far the biggest in the world, and they are challenging the status quo. Today, Hollywood might seem like a force of nature, an inevitability. The US is the king of content and exercises enormous cultural influence, not least through cinema, despite the movies being a purely economic product, of course. But it is fascinating to realize how many coincidences and world events set the stage for this level of dominance. If market escalation hadn't happened during World War I, the industry might have been more balanced. For contrast, Becker argues the music industry exploded in the 50s and is much less centralized. What if Germany had been less weak economically in the late 20s? What if Cinecittà hadn't crumbled, etc., etc.? Of course, all of this is pure speculation. In the end, we just wish we could have been there, at the birth of a medium we love so much.